Hey everyone, hope you're having a great Wednesday evening. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes until a couple people join, and then we'll get started. Okay, good evening, Yucaipa. If you haven't met me before, my name is Graham Smith, and I'm running to be your county supervisor for San Bernardino's 3rd District. I've got a little presentation I'm going to run through tonight that talks a little about what a county supervisor does, why I think I'm a good candidate for this role, a little bit about the district, and a little bit about both my countywide and local priorities. Just some quick housekeeping rules. Feel free to drop a question or a comment in the chat at any time. We'll take a couple breaks as we go through the presentation to respond to questions in real time. If you've got any friends, family who you think would be interested in joining as well, please feel free to text them or drop them a link to the presentation. And for anyone who can't join tonight, we will have this presentation posted as a video to go back to on both Facebook and YouTube. And there is one more session for Yucaipa that we have planned. Details for that are on social media. I don't have it right in front of me here. So let's just kick right off. So I'm going to run through the presentation I've got here. And I wanted to kick this off by talking first about what a county supervisor actually does. Now, I'm really conscious this it's not a sexy position, it's not a household name, and the way I talk about this is really it's one of the most important elected positions that most people don't know about. So here are the main responsibilities of a county supervisor. Kind of think about this in four main categories. First of all, approving the budget. So the person that does this job needs to have some financial literacy because San Bernardino County has about a $10 billion annual budget. Allocating resources. This county is made up of dozens of different departments. Each one of them operates a little bit differently, and most of this job is focused on figuring out which of those departments need resources to make them run the best. So specialist knowledge about each one of these departments isn't required, but a big part of this job is working with the specialists in each one of those departments to make sure they work well. Approving legislation. Most of the county supervisor's work, or the Board of Supervisors' work, is really focused on implementing legislation that the state of California and the federal government pass. There is a huge array of latitude in implementing a lot of this legislation because, as we'll talk about some specific examples later on, the state of California, as for instance, leaves a lot of leeway for the county to implement legislation in a way that works for the county. And again, I'll talk later about San Bernardino District 3. This is a huge county and a huge district, and what works for one part of the district doesn't work for another. Last but not least, securing investment. We get a huge percentage of our county's annual budget through reimbursements from the state and federal governments. In fact, that's the single biggest source of money that we get as a county. So whoever sits in this seat needs to know how to both market San Bernardino to state and federal legislators and also to private industry to get them to come to San Bernardino. So, whistle-stop tour of what a county supervisor actually does. Now let me tell you a little bit about my professional background. I'll tell you more about me as a person later on, but I want to get to the meat of this first. So I've had, we call it 2 parts to my career. First in big finance, this is where I've spent most of my professional career, and then more recently starting a couple of small businesses, and I'll talk why that's important here as well. So in my finance career, what I did is I worked for 2 big companies, not necessarily household names, but you might have come across them in just seeing them in the news. One called Lehman Brothers, another called Ares Management. Ares is based out of California, and I spent most of my time actually working and living in London out of their London office. And what I would do in that job was I would go out to external stakeholders to raise money, and the kind of people I dealt with in that role were actually household names here. So if you've ever had a public pension from one of the likes of CalPERS or SB Sarah here in San Bernardino, LA Sarah and LA County, we would raise money from institutions like that and put them in a big company fund. So that's kind of like the supervisors going to the state of California or going to the federal government to raise money. Then what we do is we take that money and we'd invest it across a whole range of sectors. So I was what was called a generalist, which means I didn't have a specific sector focus. So I would look at companies across all kinds of industries. I made a list the other day. I got to over 40 and I stopped counting. But these are things like manufacturing, childcare, healthcare, technology, software. And the way I look at this is it's kind of similar to looking at all these dozens of county departments that the county has within it. So I've got a little bit of sector-specific knowledge in a whole array of sectors. And really my specialty was one, learning about things quickly, and then two, figuring out how to allocate resources across a bunch of different companies which kind of represent the sectors of the county. More recently, I decided I didn't want to do corporate work my entire career, so I've become a senior person in the last firm I worked for, which was Ares. Just to give you a scale for some of the things I did, by the way, Ares now manages about $400 billion of assets. That's 4 times the size of the GDP of San Bernardino County. So when it comes to dealing with a big budget and big numbers, this is something I'm really comfortable doing. But like I said, I didn't want to do corporate work my entire life, so I left that job about 5 years ago, and since then have been focused on 2 small businesses. One was a health and fitness startup online, and the other was a direct-to-consumer CBD skincare business I started with one of my friends in finance. And the important takeaway for me from that experience was, 1, learning how hard it is just to run a small business, and 2, learning how hard the small business environment here is in San Bernardino County. I'll talk a little bit about District 3 in a little while and just how big and how wide-ranging it is. Small business is so important to residents here, both from the perspective of earning a livelihood, also from the perspective of maintaining our rural communities. And I really want to see small business get easier here in San Bernardino County. So that's a little bit about me and my professional background. So now I want to bring it back to the county supervisor, what that actually does, and how my experience here is actually really, really relevant. So, approving the budget. Talked about the budget being a $10 billion annual budget. Again, this is something that's completely in my wheelhouse. In my former career, I raised and invested about $10 billion. And like I said, the company I last worked for manages $400 billion, and through that corporate network, I've got access to hundreds and thousands of private companies. So when it comes to, well, I'll talk about securing investment in a second, but when it comes to bringing investment back to San Bernardino County, this is something I can do really well. Allocating resources. I kind of talked about how I would allocate resources from my company fund across a bunch of different companies. Like the role of supervisor is really heavily financial. If you've ever attended a Board of Supervisors meeting, a lot of this is focused on negotiating contracts, figuring out what departments get what resources, and this is really a core specialty of mine that I've spent about 15 years developing. I think the point on improving legislation is this is a fast-paced environment. We've seen Board of Supervisors members publicly complain that they haven't had enough time to review legislation before commenting on it, and moving at a quick pace is something I've had to do my entire career, and I'm absolutely prepared to do this at the speed at which things are required. And I kind of touched on secure investment, but marketing San Bernardino County to both the state and federal government, and also marketing San Bernardino County as a really interesting investment opportunity to private companies to bring them in, is a really core focus of mine. And I'll talk in a little bit about why I think that's really important, because right now in San Bernardino, our economy is really concentrated on a couple of different sectors, and I think that's going to set us up for failure unless we start to diversify. So why don't I pause for a second here? I'm going to move on and talk about the county and the district. But if there are any comments or questions in the chat, now is a good time to take a break.
So hello everyone. My name is Mark. I'm Graham's campaign manager. I'm running things behind the scenes. Just wanted to let you know that there is a little bit of a delay between the video and it's streaming on Facebook and YouTube. So if you have any questions or any comments. We have this presentation, obviously, but at any point, if you want to talk about something different, please just let us know. Put it in the comment, and I'll read it out to Graham, and he'll respond to it. So any questions, any comments, please just put them in the chat, and we'll get to them as and when they pop up.
Okay, so we're gonna keep going through, and then, like Mark said, anytime you've got a question, just drop it in the chat. So you guys might know that San Bernardino County is a huge county. In fact, it's the biggest county in the entire US, and District 3 is about half the total geography of San Bernardino. That makes it a really interesting district. It also makes it a really challenging one to manage because per the graphic here, we've got urban areas like where you are in Yucaipa, although I feel like Yucaipa is kind of straddles the line between urban and rural. We've got mountain regions like the one I'm sitting in now. We live just outside of Lake Arrowhead up in the San Bernardino Mountains. And then we've got a lot of desert regions in District 3 too. Now, each one of these regions needs something a little bit different. So I'll talk in a little bit about both my county-wide and my local priorities, but a huge focus for me here is making sure that the county is responding to residents in each of these different areas with solutions that work for residents. That's a really big focus of mine. So just a couple notes on the county. Talked about the size of it, 20,000 square miles, about the size of West Virginia, biggest county in the US. We've already talked about our budget. A huge percentage of that comes from the state and federal government. And like I mentioned, a one-size-fits-all approach does not work because this place is so big and it's so varied. So let's talk a little bit about my priorities for the county as a whole. This by no means is an exhaustive list, but I think it's a good place to get us started. First thing I like to talk about is financial responsibility. It's hard to go a couple weeks here in this county without seeing headlines in the papers around alleged financial misconduct, allegations of corruption, and there have been a couple of examples recently that really point this out. So last year we saw headlines around the county returning federal homeless funding because it wasn't spent properly. There's constantly some kind of lawsuit where the county of San Bernardino is named as a defendant. There was one announced just last week, again around misallocation of homeless funding. So really getting grips on the finances is a big priority of mine. This is something that I've spent a huge part of my career doing, and I've got a lot of confidence and a lot of comfort going through. I actually spend a lot of time going through this 400-page county budget. So being able to both think high level and zoom in and look at the detail here is something that I can do really well. Diversifying our economy. So right now, I'm sure you will know that the warehouse and the transport and logistics space is a hot button topic in this county, and it rightfully so for a couple reasons. I mean, there's nothing inherently bad or evil about the transport and logistics space, but I think a problem we've created for ourselves here is we've become so reliant on it. So it's by far the biggest sector for this county in terms of the jobs that it creates. And if you talk to people who are supporters of this sector, what they'll say is it's hugely important to our economy. It creates lots of jobs, and I don't disagree with that. But the problem is we need to diversify. If you're familiar with that adage of not putting all your eggs in one basket, that's kind of what we're doing here in San Bernardino County with transport and logistics. I've got some ideas on how I think we can do that. If you haven't done it yet, please follow the campaign on social media because this is where we talk about a lot of these topics. I mean, one thing I'm focused on at least exploring is a big investment in renewable energy, particularly on land and spaces that's been disturbed already, like warehouse roofs. We've got 1 billion square feet of warehouse space in the Inland Empire. Almost all of those warehouse roofs are completely empty right now. They're actually supposed to have solar panels on them per some existing regulations, and we're not even in compliance with that yet. And if you do the back of the envelope math, if you cover just half of the warehouse roofs with solar panels, you cover the electricity need for the entire county for a whole year. So I'm really focused on exploring some options like that, just because I think it's going to be a big problem when, one, the economy takes the dip and the transport and logistics sector starts to go down. But also, two, we've got now this huge reliance on transport and logistics. These are jobs that are first in line to get replaced with automated technology. It is literally happening in front of us right now. And I think there's a big risk that in the next few years, we're going to see a bunch of unemployed people in this space. So I think we need to start planning for that now. I think our relationship with the state and federal government is at an all-time low right now. I don't know what you think about the proposed secession vote that the Board of Supervisors put on the ballot in 2022. I think it's kind of a cheap stunt to try to get more funding, and it hasn't worked. So taking a step back, the whole idea behind this was to really threaten the state of California with seceding from California, setting up our own state as a way to try to get more resources from the state. The percentage of our budget that comes from reimbursements from the state of California and the federal government is pretty much in line with most other counties in California. And I think we have way more productive ways to really sell the state of California on San Bernardino. Going back to the thing about putting renewable energy on top of warehouse roofs. I know this costs money, but this is something that's absolutely in line with the agenda of the state of California. And I think if we do things that are productive and interesting, we're way more likely to get funding than if we do more of these cheap stunts and cheap tricks like secession. And then on a similar note, I really want to restore faith in the relationship between the residents of San Bernardino County and local government. I think right now this is at an all-time low. I'm not sure about you, but one thing that we've certainly seen is when you talk to local government officials here and you talk to them about something that's not exactly in their remit, they're very quick to say, that's not my problem. That's a state of California thing. That's a Caltrans thing. That's a federal government thing. I don't think that attitude's productive for anyone, and I think that adds to the lack of trust we have between residents and the government here. One thing I'm really focused on, and this is particularly relevant for unincorporated parts of the county, kind of like the one I'm in right now. I mean, ultimately, unincorporated parts of San Bernardino County, or District 3 rather, make up the majority of the geography, but not necessarily the population. And a huge problem we found is when you talk to residents out in desert communities, they feel like their needs are not being listened to. There used to be a much bigger network of, they're called MACs, or Municipal Advisory Committees, which were a way for local government to get direct input and feedback from residents. This is something I really want to explore expanding and reinstituting if elected to the Board of Supervisors. I'm very conscious that District 3 is a big place. What we need in each one of these areas is very different. I mean, I'm a local mountain resident, and I know what works for me in the mountains does not work for you in Yucaipa. And I think the main job of local government is to listen to residents and figure out what they need. So I'm going to move on to local priorities, unless we've got any questions in the chat.
Yeah, we do. Why don't you just move on to the next slide real quick?
Okay.
So we have a comment here saying, could you touch on what you think the needs of the different communities in the county are? Example, urban versus mountain versus desert. Now, I know we've tailored this presentation to address some of the priorities of residents in Yucaipa and what we've been told, but do you want to just give a quick overview of the different regions and the problems that we've become aware of?
Yeah, so first of all, we've talked county overall. I think the one thing I really want to hammer home on the county overall is that financial transparency, accountability. I mean, over the decades, we've seen so many issues with alleged and proven corruption in this county, and really goal number one of mine is to put an end to all that. So then talking about if we split, and I know this is even splitting the district into just urban, mountain, and desert isn't enough, but it's a good way to get us started. So talking about urban areas, homelessness is a huge issue in this county. Linked to that, crime, lack of affordable housing, particularly if you're in areas of District 3 like Redlands, where you've got warehouses in the middle of communities. Figuring out how to come to some kind of understanding of this problem, I think, is really important. Warehouses, like I said, are a hugely important part of our economy here, but they also bring trucks, traffic, pollution, et cetera, and I think we need to work on a way to find sustainable solutions to this problem. One idea I have here, by the way, is to seek out some resources from the state of California, start electrifying our heavy vehicle fleet so we can start to make a dent in the pollution issue we have here. Because if you weren't aware, San Bernardino County has the most polluted air in the entire country. And I think that's something we need to change. So that can get us started on urban areas. On mountain areas where I am, disaster prep is a big thing here. I mean, a huge part of the reason I've actually decided to run for this seat is because we saw just how ineffective the county was at rescuing all of us residents last winter when we got dumped on by a bunch of snow. So disaster prep, I'd like to find ways to make small business easier here in this county. There are real issues you find when you're pulling a permit for a small business, because in mountain areas, as a for instance, we've got really specific geography, which means that the city or the county's regulations, which are often heavily geared toward life in a city, don't work up here. Short-term rentals are a very hot button topic, both in the mountains and the desert. And then moving to the desert, again, short-term rentals are a big problem. Right now, residents in the desert, particularly in unincorporated parts of the desert, are really upset about some trash collection changes that the county's pushing through. I mean, they say the county's pushing through. This is actually a state regulation, but it's been kind of, the implementation of it has been kind of bungled by the county. And some residents are now having to drive a half an hour out of their way just to drop off some of their food trash. Again, more support for unincorporated areas across the district. That goes back to reinstituting, expanding that network of MAC committees so that local government has a direct line into each of these various local areas across the district and has an idea on what's going on. So I'm conscious that's a very high-level whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that gives you just a good feel for the different parts of the agenda for the different parts of the district. And what's also worth noting is there's a full breakdown on the website. If you click the District 3 link, we've got mountains, desert, urban, county overall, all split out. Okay, another question?
As if that wasn't expansive enough, I just wanted to add to that list what we've been talking about recently in terms of jobs and economic opportunities, particularly in the desert. And I know you kind of mentioned, homelessness, affordable housing, crime, but obviously, there's a big drug use problem. A lot of those are kind of interconnected, and I know, if people have questions about that, again, just a reminder, please put them in the comments. This is meant to be an open discussion, so we do have more of the presentation, but the more questions we get, the more we can just turn this into a normal conversation.
Exactly. And I think the point I certainly want to hammer home when you talk about things like crime, drug use, whatnot, the thing that I think we can do, the thing that I think I can bring to this role that I don't think other candidates credibly can, is being able to allocate our resources the most efficiently and the most effectively. Because you hear people talk about, I'm for public safety or I'm for law enforcement. I think everyone is fundamentally for all of those things. And I think the thing that I know and I can bring to the table is that if we want the best possible public safety, law enforcement, the best possible county overall, it means we need to be spending our tax revenue the most efficiently, and we need to be funding all the various county agencies to the best extent possible. So that is something I can bring to this role. So we've kind of touched on some of the local priorities already. So these are geared toward life in cities. Again, I know Yucaipa is a city, but it also has a really rural feel that I know residents in Yucaipa really love and want to retain. So this is meant just to get us started, and then any questions and comments you have, please drop them in the chat and we'll talk about them. So warehouses, I kind of talked about this already. It's an industry we already have, and I think what we need to do is just make it work a little bit better for us. And what that means is retrofitting warehouse roofs with renewable energy to start cleaning up our air, electrifying the heavy vehicle fleets, and also thinking about some sensible restrictions in terms of how close warehouses can be built to residential areas. So there's been a couple different proposals, both locally and out of the California State Legislature, to try to put some distance between warehouses and things like schools and churches. Thus far, nothing has passed, and I really want to explore some sensible regulations here so that we're not destroying our local communities any more than they already have been. Crime has been a huge issue in so many urban areas across the county. I think the Sheriff's Department is doing the best job they possibly can, and one thing I'm really focused on is just making sure they are funded as well as they possibly can be, have the resources they need to do their job as best as possible. Homelessness, this county has had a long history of trying to tackle homelessness, but also really mismanaging homeless funds. So about a year ago, the Board of Supervisors allocated, it was $73 million specifically to tackle homelessness, started spending money on addressing homelessness, and during that time saw homelessness continue to increase. It was only recently, as in the last couple months, where they actually set up a subcommittee to start understanding the root causes of homelessness. doing things like that are really, really core to me as an individual and to the work I used to do in my professional career. One thing I will commit to you is I'm not going to spend your hard-earned tax dollars unless we know exactly what we're getting for that. So I really want to understand the problem before we just start throwing money at it, because we've seen the county do that with a lot of things. Homelessness, we saw them do it recently, understanding the impact of STRs, spending lots of money on consultants that really didn't have any kind of conclusion. Look, homelessness is an issue so many different places. I think it's the homelessness issue we have in San Bernardino County, fortunately, isn't as bad as some of the neighborhoods in, say, Los Angeles. And I do think we have the opportunity to fix it, but it's going to take some focused thought and making sure we're not spending our money on things that don't actually go anywhere. And I think linked to that is making sure we have enough affordable housing across the district. I know particularly in Yucaipa, we've talked to so many residents who have told us about the various initiatives to try to close mobile home parks to build more expensive accommodation. It's really important to me personally that we are not displacing residents and creating a bigger problem than we already have. So again, this is going to come down to working closely with city managers in Yucaipa and across the district to make sure we have the right solutions for each of these neighborhoods. So that's a quick high level on some urban focused priorities. There are plenty more. So check out my website. We've got a whole section of issues that are focused on different parts of the district. It's by far the most comprehensive out there. And if there's anything on your mind that we haven't talked about on the website or we're not covering, please let us know. A huge part of this for us is making sure we are responding to your feedback in real time and giving you a real view. And yeah, please ask us questions at any time. So any other questions in the chat?
Not yet. I feel like we're covering a lot of ground, so we'll give people a chance to kind of digest what we've been talking about, and maybe we'll get some questions towards the end.
Okay. So I'm just going to move on and give you a bit more info on me personally for anyone who's interested, just so you know who I am and where I'm coming from. So I've had a lifelong connection to San Bernardino. I was born and I was raised in a neighborhood called Topanga Canyon near LA, if anyone's ever heard of that. The house that I'm talking to you from this evening, my grandparents built 50 years ago, so I've been coming to this very house my entire life. We have a campsite, I'm going to call it, in Lucerne Valley. Again, I've been visiting my entire life, so I've had a lifelong connection to not just to San Bernardino, but in particular to District 3. I've lived here full-time for about 4 years. And before that, I touched on it, I was living and working in London. And one thing I really hope to bring to this role is a really broad base of both work and life experiences, because I think providing perspective and challenge in this role is really, really important. So in my previous life, when I was working in London, I did business across 5 different continents. I traveled to 50 countries, so I've been around the block. I studied locally in California. I went to USC, studied finance and accounting. Like I said, finance is just built into me. That's what I've done for such a long time. But I'm also just a normal guy. I like to cook. I like to tinker on my workshop and just hang out. So why am I actually doing this? I've never had any political aspirations, and this was never in my life plan. For me, this has come down to the combination of a couple different things. So when we moved here 4 years ago, we really started to notice quickly how difficult the county made life for local residents here. And I think this is particularly relevant for people who live in unincorporated parts of San Bernardino County, because the Board of Supervisors is the closest thing we have to local government. We don't have a city council or a mayor up here in our mountain communities anyway. So as soon as we moved here, we saw challenges faced by residents in terms of simple stuff like renovating your house, trying to open a small business. There's a restaurant down the road that's been trying to open for 3 years and has been caught in a bunch of county red tape. And that really made me think, what is going on that's making life so difficult for people here? But then for me, it really got, my involvement really got intense during the snowstorms last winter. So if you remember reading in the news or watching on TV, I'm in a little neighborhood called Sky Forest, but all around these mountain communities, we got buried in 10 to 12 feet of snow in about a week. The county really wasn't communicating with residents. We had no idea what was going on. People were stuck in their houses, and that's when I got really involved. I led a big community call to try to get us all some more attention, some more resources. I developed a really positive professional relationship with Supervisor Rao during that time, and really provided a lot of insight and advice on how to communicate with people up here. And I think it was that experience for the first time that I really realized I had something to offer, and I really enjoyed stepping up for my community. So that's kind of how it happened. I'm certainly of the view that career politicians have been screwing things up for everybody across this country, and I'm really committed to providing both a fresh perspective and also some real independence here. I haven't made any promises to anyone. I am genuinely doing this out of the care for the residents of San Bernardino County. So just to sum up, and then we'll take a last question break at the end. And I know there's a delay, so put your questions in the chat now, so that by the time we get to the end of this slide, we can get straight to them. So just on me, if we think that the financial aspect here is important, both getting more money from the state of California, from the federal government, getting to grips with our own management here in terms of financial misconduct, corruption. I am the candidate who can credibly handle it. No one else running in this race has any kind of financial background or training, and this is something that's really core to what I do well. Every department in the county can benefit from the skill set that I bring to the table, because like I said, I was a generalist. My specialty is really just learning about things quickly, figuring out what makes them work, and then figuring out what they need to work better. So as I look across these various county departments, as I spend time with our county budget, there are already easy ways I've identified both to save money, and I already know some initial questions I want to ask the department heads when I get elected to this seat. If you follow the campaign on social media, and if you don't, please do. One thing that I think you'll see is we respond quickly to issues, both from residents, from concerned citizens, to things we see in the news. We're quick to digest stuff and put out statements as a campaign, because it's really important to me and to the campaign that you know that we're responding with urgency, and we are responding with honesty and accuracy. So social media is a great place to see that in action. Like, unlike most campaigns that just use social media as a platform to talk about campaigning, we're using it as a platform to talk about real issues across this county. And back to that point of District 3 being a huge place, a one-size-fits-all approach is really not appropriate here. So even though I am a resident in the unincorporated communities of the mountains, one thing that I really have for you as a resident of Yucaipa is empathy, because I know that whatever solution works for me here in the mountains doesn't work for you in Yucaipa, which doesn't work for someone in the desert. I know what it's like to be a resident in a part of the county that the county has in some ways left for dead even. So it's really important to me to be able to empathize with all the residents in these various different places of the county. And I know really well that a one-size-fits-all approach that comes out of the central government of San Bernardino County is not going to work for everyone. So I'm committed to listening to you. So that's the quick whistle-stop tour on me, the platform, the campaign. I really think I am bringing a lot to this role, and one thing I'll commit to you is if I get this job, I will do it really well. I'll do it with transparency, honesty, and integrity. So with that, any questions in the chat?
Not yet, but I wanted you to maybe just address one comment that we had in the last session for Yucaipa, which is this is your first run at political office. How do you think that's something that's helpful or not helpful?
I touched on it before. I think the fact that one of the points I really bring to the table here is the fact that I am not a career politician. I think if I look both at San Bernardino County and quite frankly across the state and across the country, I think people who have been career politicians are the ones really screwing things up for everyone. big money in politics, promises made to individuals, to corporations. I mean, if you look at the way the current Board of Supervisors re-election campaigns are financed, so many of those donations come from big corporates in the district. So I think the fact that this is a first-time run for me, the fact that I haven't had political aspirations before, is actually one of the biggest benefits I bring to this campaign, because I can be truly independent. One thing I do want to give you some reassurance on, though, is even though I haven't held public office before, I'm no stranger to the political game. So the two big corporates I worked for in my previous career are some of the most highly politicized environments you can possibly imagine. And a huge part of that job wasn't just the kind of factual stuff I talked about before, but it was also getting people on sides, selling people on a deal or on an investment, getting people to vote for things. Like this, the political skill set is really something I took away from my previous job. So even though I haven't been in public office before, I know what I'm doing in that area.
One of the questions we got was about the relationship between the county and you as a county supervisor and the city councils that, I think there are like 24 of them around San Bernardino County, 12 of which I believe are in District 3. So what do you kind of see as the relationship between a city council and the county when, residents maybe are just used to hearing from and dealing with the city council as opposed to someone like you who would be the county supervisor?
I think the thing that I would most want to be as it relates to the relationship between the cities and the county is an advocate. As I think one thing that the county can do that sometimes cities can't is access different types of funding from, say, the state of California or the federal government, and really be a conduit to bring as many resources as possible back to the county. I said I'm really going to keep coming back to this point around gathering resources, getting as much funding as we can from private companies and from state and federal governments, and then allocating those resources as effectively as we possibly can across all the cities and all the unincorporated parts of the county. So really, really the thing that I want to do with the various cities in the county is work closely together and find ways that we can work productively to make life better for people. And then also use those cities kind of like in unincorporated areas where we want to have more max. Use the cities are the way that we find out what local residents in Yucaipa or local residents in Grand Terrace or Loma Linda really need.
Yeah, just to add to that, one of the things we've been talking about recently is how, the borders of a given city, there's not like a big moat around it, right? Like one added benefit of having the county work closely with the city councils is to kind of create a sort of uniform level of quality in public services, so that you don't have people on one street who get a good service for something and people on the next street who don't, because obviously that kind of creates a lot of unfairness and resentment, and we get kind of divisions between the different areas in the county which don't need to necessarily exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. The last thing was just to let people know where they can come meet you in person or see you talk, forums, etc.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so social media is the best place to keep in touch with where we're going to be. So we're gonna post our full in-person schedule as and when events come up. There's an event that I want to give people a heads up on in Redlands tomorrow evening. There is a candidate forum that is being hosted by the University of Redlands. I believe it starts at 7 p.m. We will post details for that on our social media. There's going to be another candidate forum in the desert in a couple weeks. And we are working on a couple of in-person events in Yucaipa. We don't have the details for those just yet, but as soon as we do, we'll put those on social media. In the meantime, you can always reach us either through messaging on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever platform you use. There's an email address on the website. We are easy to contact. You can find us wherever is most convenient for you.
We've got a couple extra questions just kind of snuck in the last minute. One from Christina, who says, I think an issue we need to address is cold and heat shelters for our unhoused population. How can the county help with that?
So certainly, I mean, I know the county has historically provided some of these. I know libraries have often been a resource that they've opened up, but I think we need to do a better job of making sure we have resources available at all times as well. Again, I think this comes back to making sure we are as well resourced as we possibly can be as a county, and also making sure we're coordinated. One thing that really came out of my experience in the winter storms last year is there are often a lot of local organizations and local groups who really do some incredible work in the community and really want to be involved. And we haven't built the right communications networks between them and the county to really facilitate organizing this stuff. And this is one thing I really want to explore, whether that's for disaster prep, shelters, as you mentioned. I think we can do a better job as a county of working with both the cities and also with local organizations to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one thing we were talking about the other day, which is that it's not enough for the county to sit around in a conference room and think about, the solutions that are needed for these problems. You need to get out and talk to a whole bunch of different people, including people who are actually experiencing homelessness themselves. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think this kind of touches on the point we were talking about before around having funding for a problem, but that's not enough. You really need to understand what's going on before you start trying to solve the problem. So we were doing, I can't remember if it was a town hall or chatting with someone on social media, but actually this was someone who used to be homeless and said, I've got really strong opinions on what works and what doesn't. And I think we need to be talking to people in all kinds of positions in a bunch of different capacities to really figure out what works. This is definitely not an exercise in Board of Supervisors just decide something without gathering input. And just so you know, a huge factor of my previous job was, if I had to distill it down, it was take all possible data and information you possibly can and use that to make a really informed and rational decision. And that's the kind of thinking I really want to bring to this Board of Supervisors.
We have one more question from Ray, who says, how will you fund a legitimate and full campaign? It might be worth putting the last slide up just because that says.
Yes. Okay. So we have, on that note, I'm glad you asked. So everything we're doing is funded individually. So through concerned citizens, perhaps like yourself. So we have a QR code here on this last slide. There's also a donation link on the website, smithforsb.com. We've been fundraising at a healthy pace for a totally grassroots campaign. It's really important to me and to the campaign that we're not taking donations from the big corporates in the county, because I think it's important we need to be really, really independent. So I know there are a lot of concerned residents in San Bernardino who feel like the government hasn't had their backs. So if you are at all up for any kind of contribution to the campaign, anything is gratefully received. We're trying to do stuff as on a modern level as possible. So we're obviously doing these events virtually. So we do these Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, focused on each area across the district. We do a lot of online advertising, text campaigns. We're getting all of our mailers and our walk literature printed. So it does cost money to run a campaign. So any donations are certainly gratefully received because we've still got quite a bit of work to do between now and the primary. And just on that note, if you didn't know already, the primary is March 5th, as highlighted here on the slide. Excuse me. Ballots are going to start arriving soon. They're going to arrive in the next couple weeks. They should start dropping in mailboxes from February 5th. So one thing, if you can't donate to the campaign, one thing that's really, really helpful is to just spread the word. Any kind of organic outreach is incredibly helpful, whether that's having people follow the campaign on social media or just word of mouth. So yeah, really, it's a combination of donations from individuals and spreading the word, and that's how we're going to get it done.
Yeah, I would just add, sorry, this is Mark, the campaign manager again. Just want to add one real quick thing to that. Which is that, I challenge everyone, if you like what you've heard tonight, follow us on social media. The handle is @SmithForSB, which is shown on screen there. That's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And maybe a little mini challenge to anyone who likes what they've heard and wants to follow is just to forward Graham's profile onto, say, 5 other people. Spreading the word organically is incredibly helpful. It helps our ads reach a wider audience, which reduces the amount of money that we need in order to run a legitimate and full campaign. Just a quick side note, we mentioned that we're not taking donations from corporate donors. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing illegal about that. But if you've ever attended a Board of Supervisors meeting, you'll know that the Board of Supervisors approve contracts and projects that involve some of these companies that are worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And so we really just want to kind of try and retain a little bit of independence as much as we can, so that if Graham gets elected and he's sitting in that room making those decisions, that he's not going to vote a certain way because they gave him money for the campaign. So that's just a principle that we're sticking to.
Yeah, trying to do this as honestly as possible. I mean, this really comes back to the reason for wanting to do this. For me, it's all about taking better care of our communities. I think we really need some independence at the Board of Supervisors level. If you've ever attended a meeting, it's really uncommon to get through a whole meeting and not see one of the supervisors have to sit out a vote because they've taken a donation from a company that they're voting for a contract on. So I think it's really important we start to regain some independence. So if any of that resonates with you, please consider donating whatever you can to the campaign. Because we're doing so much digitally, literally anything helps. So yeah, please donate if you can.
All right, I think that's it for questions. So yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. If you have questions going forward, like I said, you know where to reach us. Drop us a line on our email. It's info@smithforsb.com, and that's on the website. Any one of the social media platforms, we are pretty easy to contact. So just reach out for any questions or comments, and then stay tuned on social media for the full calendar of both virtual and in-person events. And we hope to see you very, very soon. So thanks again for tuning in this evening. Again, tell your friends. This will be on replay for anyone who hasn't seen it live tonight. And we hope to see you around the district. All right, everyone, take care.